Good day, everyone. Good day, everyone. Welcome to my recap. Right. So today I'm going to do a revision on Icass test one. On Icass test one. So on module one, basic principles of communication. Basic principles of communication. So I'm going to read the question 1.1. 1.1. All right. Say, a mother at the resort asked Mary whether her son would be able to take part in the games. Mary nods her head to say yes, but the mother does not see it because she looks away at her son who yells for her attention at the moment. Right. Question 1.1, it says, draw Jacobson's model of communication to illustrate the communication process that takes place. Clearly label all the elements. So I'm going to draw the communication process, right? So I'm gonna need a space. That's why I moved down, right? So I'm going to draw the communication model. The communication model, right? So, right. So the source is the sender. The sender is the source, right? The sender is the source. The sender is the source. The encoder, the transmitter, right? So in this scenario, the mother is the one who was asking. The mother was asking, right? So it's the one who is the sender, the mother, right? So the sender is going to encode the message. The sender is going to encode the message, right? The sender is going to encode the message. So the message is encoded. The sender is going to encode the message. Right? So the message, what is the message? The message is that information that is being sent. The message is that information that is being sent. The message is that information that is being sent. Information that is being sent. That's the message, right? The message. The message, right? So what's the message? Right. The message that was spoken here, right? The mother says, can my son take part? Take part, right, in the games. In the games. Right? Right. The message that is being sent. Right. Another message that is being sent. So the message that is being sent is, can my son take part in the games? Right. Can my son take part in the games? Right. So we can find that the message is sent to the receiver through a channel. This message is sent through a channel to the receiver, right? Which is the channel was face to face. The channel in this scenario was face to face. Was face to face. So the receiver is the one who decodes the information. It decodes is the decoder. Decodes the message. Message is being decoded by the receiver, right? Right. The receiver is Mary. Mary is the receiver. Mary is the receiver. Right. And then it's going to give a what? A feedback. A feedback is given. A feedback is given. A feedback is given. Right. A feedback which is very fast feedback. The feedback can be direct or non. Sorry, the feedback can be verbal or non-verbal. Feedback which can be verbal or non-verbal. Feedback can be verbal or non-verbal. For this instance, Mary notes. Mary notes. Showing yes, meaning to say body language was used, right? He notes, right? That's a feedback, right? So you can find that during the communication process, there are barriers. During the communication process, there is noise, which is physical, in the form of a physical barriers. Physical barriers. In the form of physical barriers. In the form of physical barriers. For example, for instance, here, there is a barrier. The son was yelling, which is a physical barrier, right? Son yelling for attention. Son yelling for attention, right? So that's the diagram that the examiner wants you to draw, right? So the code is the language that is being used, right, is English, and the medium that is being used was face-to-face. They use face-to-face communication. They were seeing each other face-to-face. They were seeing each other, right? So that's the communication model. That's the communication model, right? So I'm going to go to 1.12. 1.12. 1.12 says which category of communication takes place in this scenario, right? Since there are two people who are communicating using spoken words and they are seeing each other, right? You can find that it is interpersonal communication. Interpersonal communication. Remember, there are 4 categories of communication. There are 4 categories of communication, which includes intrapersonal, extrapersonal, and mass communication, right? So in this scenario, interpersonal communication was used, right, was taking place. So I'm going to move on to 1.2. 1.2. 1.2. 1.2, right? Mary takes you with her to the gala as her guest. Name the different types of communication that take place in this scenario, write only the type of communication next to the question number, right? So 1.21, right? Mary waved to Joe to indicate that he should start talking, right? The waving is what you call kinesis or a body language or a non-verbal communication, right? The waving, right? That's body language or kinesis. We call it kinesis, right? Which is in the form of body language. He used the body language to communicate to Joe. She waved, right? Let's move on to question 1.22. 1.22, right? It reads 1.2. The spectators sit on desk chairs next to one another at the side of the pool. The spectators sit on the desk next to one another at the side of the pool. Right. So what type of communication is this one? We call it proxemics. Proxemics, which is the study of what? Of distance. We will call it zones. Zones. Right. So they sit on desk chairs next to one another. That's proxemics. Right. Let's move on to 1.23. 1.23. 1.23. Right. It says, hello, Mary. Hello, Mary. How are you? One of the guests asks on the way to his table. Right. What kind of communication was this one? We call it fatigue semiology, words that are used to convey a feeling rather than a message. Words that are used to start a conversation. Words that are used to start a conversation. Hello, Mary, how are you? Right. It is used to convey a feeling rather than a meaning. Right. So let's move on to 1.24. Right. The mother yelled excitedly when she saw the celebrate guest arriving at the event. Right. So yelled is what you call acoustic semiology. It's what you call acoustic semiology, which is the communication using sound. Communication using sound. Acoustic semiology. Communication using sound. Acoustic semiology. Yelling, it means that she used her voice to yell, yelling. She used her voice, right? And then let's go to 1.25. 1.25, right? A banner announcing gala in big letters was fastened to the railings near the pool, right? A big banner was placed near the pool. So this one is what you call visual semiology, which are graphics or pictures. Visual semiology. Communication with anything that needs to be seen, to be understood. That's visual semiology, right? Here we can find that they are graphics. They are graphics, right? So I'm going to move on to question 1.3. Question 1.3. Question 1.3. Question 1.3. 1.3. Right. So saying indicate whether the following statements true or false by writing true or false next to the question number, right? So the first question that we're going to discuss is this one. 1.31, non-verbal communication always support verbal communication, right? So it's true, but in other case, you can find that it will contradict verbal communication and it will lead to conflicting messages, right? Messaging, right? So it's not always the case. Sometimes it contradicts, right? So the answer is what? It's false. It's not always the case, right? It's not always the case. Sometimes it might contradict verbal communication. It's not always the case, right? It's not always the case. It does not always support verbal communication. Sometimes it contradicts verbal communication, right? So let's move on to 1.3, 1.32, 1.32, right? When communication takes place in a neutral place, the communicator is at an advantage. Neutral place is a place where neither the sender and the receiver has information, right? It is neutral, right? The place is not familiar to both the sender or the receiver. So here there is no one at an advantage, right? Right, so that's false. That's false, right? Let's move on to 1.33, 1.33, 1.33, 1.33, which is acoustic semiology involves reading messages from certain sounds or signals other than language. The answer is true. Acoustic semiology is the study of what? Of sounds and signal. So sound and signal, that's true, right? I'm going to move on to 2.4, 2.4, right? Saying words and symbols, that stands for concepts, and if the sender knows the correct symbol to convey the concept, the communication process will be successful. Right? That's the answer is false. False. Right? The receiver must also know the what? The concept. Ne? So for communication to be effective, the receiver must also know the concept, the symbols for the communication to be successful. If the sender knows the correct symbols and is the one who is the communicator, and the receiver does not know the symbols, communication becomes ineffective. So both the sender and the receiver are supposed to know the words and symbols and even the concept. Right. And then let me go to the last question on this segment, which is 1.35. It reads, the sender relies on the receiver's feedback in order to know the communication has been successful. That's true. That's true. That's true. Right. It's true. For the sender to know if the communication was successful, it's supposed to get the feedback. Supposed to get the feedback. So if the feedback is positive, it means that communication is successful. communication is successful, right? So I'm going to go to the last question, which reads, distinguish between appreciative listening and attentive listening. So it is very good for you to, if you are distinguishing, you can draw a what? A table. You can draw a table to distinguish the difference. You can draw a table, right? Or you can tabulate. Right? You can tabulate, right? So we want to distinguish the difference between appreciative and attentive listening, right? So you can distinguish these two by definition, right? So here, appreciative, that's where you listen first and then you react. You listen first, then reacts or respond to the receiver's message, so to the sender's message, to the speaker's message. You listen first. We call it appreciative listening, right? Well, right. Well, it's attentive listening. You want to listen to the main purpose. You listen to the speaker's main purpose. To the speaker's main purpose. You want to listen to the purpose of the speech, the speaker's main purpose. You want to listen to the speaker's main purpose of the communication. All right. So you can find that you only listen first if you engage. When you engage yourself to the conversation, to the message, right? Whereby you try by all means to eliminate barriers, right? So, and then attentive listening involves listening for information as you want to identify and understand the speaker's main points. Here, you want to identify and understand. You want to identify and understand the speaker's main points. What does the speaker wants to say? What are the points that he wants to explain? You want to understand, right? So these are the difference between appreciative and attentive listening. So this question has the whole of question 1. It carries a total of 30 marks out of 100. 30 marks out of 100. Right. Thank you so much for your time. Let's meet again, right, in another segment where I will continue to give revision classes for Icass test 1. Thank you so much. Have a good day. Stay blessed.